About half past hour on our start time, so it's more than just reasonable to get started right away. Um, we have our welcome remarks by Dr. Lawrence Sherman.
Good morning to our facilitators, our partners, and all of you who have worked hard to bring this tough innovation and entrepreneurship seminar to us here. We are very grateful. I would like to thank you for that. We'd like to welcome all of you, regardless of where you come from. We know some of you may not be medical people, even though this is a medical institution. We welcome all of you from wherever aspect of life you've come from to participate in this program. It's a new thing, and we are hoping that it will help all of us improve our ability to fend for ourselves. Too many of us depend on government for everything. I was in Sierra Leone last year, and in their university medical school, innovation and entrepreneurship is a course that is taught during the semesters when they are there. Because tomorrow, as more and more people begin to work in government, people will have to go into private and to begin to figure out ways to sustain themselves as they continue. So we'd like to thank you and welcome all of you today to this program. And we hope that all of us can leave from here, take this to our own institutions, and try to move them forward. Again, I say welcome.
Thank you. Funny, I introduced Dr. Sherman and I didn't introduce myself. My name is Abayami Cole, and I work on the Bridgeview Project, particularly with the iLab Liberia. This is something I've been wanting to do. It's not in the program, but if you hear generally on the Bridgeview Project, I just like to recognize you by standing. Just stand wherever you are. If you're a member of the Bridgeview Project, if you're working on it, whatever with Vanderbilt, iLab Liberia, Simmet, ULCHS, and you just stand. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for the hard work that is being done, the hours of toil and thinking. I just thought at this moment would be the time to actually recognize you, because without your efforts, we wouldn't be here this morning. But specifically, sorry, don't mean to be selfish, I'd like to recognize our Component 6 team, the Innovation and Entrepreneurship team. This today is about this team, so I'd like to ask you to just stand and then we just applaud you for the hard work being done. Component 6, Innovation and Entrepreneurship team. Thank you. Thank you very much. And all those that are providing supervisory services to this team, we want to say thank you for making this day a success. Um, we're now going to have the overview of today's program. And there's no other person but my friend, my own dear friend, Simi Yampo.
And thank you. I would like to call Dr. Pensape to join me. So we are going to do this overview in two folds. The CTLI encompasses many programs, and we work on the innovation part of the CTLI. So Dr. Pensape will give the overview of the whole CTLI, while I give the innovation in Pacific and overview. Thanks.
Okay. So I think I can stand behind her because Simmet is very tall and I'm short. But good morning again. I'm sure we are all glad to be here, and I want to let you know that the team is excited this morning to see you all, and thank you for honoring our invitation. So we see here that the CTLI is a center for teaching, learning, and innovation. It is in a public and private academic hub for research utilization, innovation, interpersonal training or interprofessional training, and knowledge generation. So we want to generate knowledge through learning, innovation, and training. And then this is going to be through health science education programs. So the CTLI will connect faculty. It will be able to connect students, policy makers, clinicians, and entrepreneurs to optimize research-driven practice throughout the health sector. So when we look here, we see that there are diverse people in the hall here today. Like when Dr. Sherman was giving our welcome remark, we heard that some people are not in the medical field and they are here today. But we know that as entrepreneurs, we can work in the health and sector by making sure that our products we have is able to impact the health sector. So there are programs under the Bridge U program, and we have faculty development trainings, including pedagogy, mentorship. We have the Camp Excel, which is an annual science camp for secondary school educations or secondary school students. And then we have research on utilizing evidence in the health sciences. We have exponential learning and assessment lab, which is going to be held at the John F. Kennedy Memorial Hospital. We also have, for which we are here today, or we also have the evidence-based decision-making course for current policy makers. Then we are here today for innovation and entrepreneurship trainings, mentorship, and incubation. So this is why we are here today, and we are going to be telling you more about that when we start our seminar today. So we pray that you will listen, and we pray for your undivided attention as we give it to Simmet.
Thank you. Just a quick announcement. We have a viewing room because we know we have full capacity already, and there are a lot of people still outside that want to attend this program. So we have organized a viewing room just right across, just in the building called the Anatomy Lab. You can go there and you can have a space, and you'll be able to view the program and learn and everything that we offer today. And just I want to recognize our value partners on the innovation team. We have two co-partners, and that is the Simmet team and the iLab team. So Simmet, they will speak a lot more about their organization, but Simmet stands for the Consultant for Improving Medicine with Technology and Innovation. And we'll have our value local partner, and that is iLab, which is a think tech hub that utilize research to improve and promote our business skills. Okay, so innovation and entrepreneurship are key strategic activities of the CTLI to promote startups and entrepreneurship in healthcare. By accelerating novel healthcare solutions, its foremost goal is to improve patients' lives, grow our economy, and strengthen our local system. The program provides a variety of support packages to entrepreneurs, students, faculty members with innovative ideas in the field of healthcare. The program will be run by an exciting range of individuals, from researchers and innovators early in their careers to entrepreneurs building out their next big idea. By being a part of the CTLI's community, these participants learn not only from mentors and key and opinion leaders from each other through networking and group learning events. We support innovators who want to develop and innovative products and services to improve healthcare delivery, both commercially viable ideas, which is our startup and potential, and projects that lead to open access offers. All supported projects must go beyond peer research and increase the chances of survival and the quality of life of patients. We offer a variety of programming and resources for entrepreneurs and adventures throughout various stages of growth. And that is from mentoring to funding opportunities to workshops and speaker series. We listen to our participants' feedback to tailor from the world's leading investors and community health system. Ladies and gentlemen, students, faculty members, and folks from the private sector, the team has been working for a couple of months We are very, very excited. We are full with enthusiasm and commitment to push this forward. I want to further introduce our flagship program, the Health, the Heat Hour. So the Heat Hour is a year-long incubation and investment program that provides early-stage entrepreneurs with investment, expertise, and support from world-leading investors and community healthcare system. That program presents a dynamic opportunity to serve as a platform to launch and develop startups into scalable, viable, and profitable businesses. It provides a platform for participants and incubators, which I normally term that, to access the diverse resources of faculty and entrepreneurial community. This strives to support students, faculty, and larger entrepreneurial and community interested in innovation and finding a home for launching immersive experiences that are scalable businesses. It provides support for entrepreneurs who are interested in developing early stage business ventures by providing access to technology development and network assistance. We have the space, we have access to mentors and subject matter experts. The HUDA leverages deep domain knowledge that faculty, professional healthcare experts, and industry and practitioners with real-world experience bring to the table as mentors, which will further enrich the knowledge and efforts of participants who are launching their business. We believe that this is not all about delivering a positive impact on accelerating healthcare development and new venture creation for students, founders, investors, mentors, and other related parties. It is a program for everyone who wants to learn, ideate, and build their startups into successful businesses to better the health of all Liberians. Great. So this is the main part, and this is the pillars of our program. So we have learned from regional and international experts, and we have also studied the entrepreneurship landscape of Liberia and improved and systematically engineered our programming to fill in those gaps and address the challenges that we have identified. So the program is structured into 4 parts. And the first one has to do with events. We will provide the opportunity to participate in regular events, ranging from community building to education partners and seminars and networking events with investors and potential customers. For example, we have the fire chat. This is a conversation with founders designed to shift mindsets and inspire a new generation of entrepreneurs in Liberia. And then we'll move to the next stage where we have the ideation stage. During this phase, we are nurturing a new generation of ideas. We will manage a rigorous process from requirements and gathering to designing the mechanics of innovation and ideation and challenges internally and externally. And then after that stage, you move to the creation stage, which is the most important stage of our programming. At this stage, entrepreneurs will build a viable plan for growth, set objectives for the next 3 years to come, and anticipate risks and define and mitigation strategies to always be prepared to move forward. So like at this stage, you will also have the opportunity to receive up to a 10,000 grant for your new venture plus technical assistance. And then after that stage, we move to the implementation phase where we will apply best practice and innovation of processes and tools to guide and nurture the next generation of revenue generating business models from testing and validation through scale. Great. And after that, you will be part of a community where we are building an innovation and community where we will bring together talented individuals who are passionate and innovative and connect them with associated innovation communities and networks that will provide lifelong support to your venture. Are you bringing cutting edge and ideas solutions to healthcare landscape through software, hardware, diagnostics, and intervention? Do you have a research that you want to translate into viable business? Or are you a business oriented that don't have a right idea to launch a business? The CTLI that is right for you. We are excited to learn about your innovative healthcare and solution today and in future time of our engagement and bring your game-changing business to the CTLI. We are excited to support funders and teams students and faculty members through various stages of their journey, for initial business development and fundraising, our product design, and ultimately scaling to have maximum impact in our healthcare system. As this is really exciting to us, I'm sure you are excited about this opportunity as well. During the time of the event, please copy these useful links to start your journey. Let's improve patients' lives. Let's grow our local economy. Let's strengthen our healthcare system. Thank you.
Thank you, Simmet. Thank you, Dr. McLean. Somebody asked if I have forgotten Doc the first time, so I say no. But it's just fair enough that she's a rock star and should be introduced by another rock star. So that's why I allowed Simmet to introduce her. But thank you, as Simmet going on, with the slippery tongue and introducing the CTLI innovation and entrepreneurship program. It looks so easy, but that has been very tireless times and months of preparation, to get to this. Is Chelsea in the room? Because I also wanted to mention that since our entrepreneurship flagship program have been constantly rejected by the names we've been coming up with, so the team secretly conspire against Chelsea. Is she around? This is the team secretly. Thank you. Conspire and say, look, we got to get Chelsea on this. If she rejects this, she's gonna find a name, I guess. So Chelsea came in and surprisingly and interestingly said, "This is fantastic." So as we hear, this name just came up like 2 days ago, guys. Just 2 days ago, after months and months and several name change. So we want to say thank you for that, Chelsea. Thank you for the validation as well. We're excited for that. We are about to get into our first presentation, and it's good that we make it on time. I'm pretty sure that you heard some very wonderful things in the overview, and they are all a reality. And one of the ways you can start assessing some of the things that will be done needfully or so in the program will be as you're about to undergo and hear these presentations. Thank you. So to not delay any much further, we're about to have our first presentation. If you look at the 10 o'clock schedule, it is what is in a startup business plan. And this is going to be facilitated by Eric Evans of Simmet. Let's give him a hand applause.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Evans. I'm from Simmet, and I'm going to talk to you this morning about what's in a business plan. Now, what's in a startup business plan may not sound like the most exciting topic, but it is really, really important. And I'm going to try to make it more interesting by telling you a few business stories along the way. And maybe the first business story I'll tell you was from yesterday afternoon. Our group went to interview the founder and CEO of Lucky Pharmacy. And probably everyone in this room knows Lucky Pharmacy, right? They're quite a big business in Liberia. They have 25 branches in Liberia, plus branches in Sierra Leone, plus branches in Gambia. And we had a very good conversation, a very good meeting with the senior management there, including the CEO and founder. We talked about the challenges of starting a business in Liberia and the things you need to do and so forth. And as we left and wrapped up, my colleague Mike asked him, do you have a single piece of advice that you would give aspiring entrepreneurs in Liberia? And he thought for a minute and he said, I would tell them, think very carefully before you get started. Because the markets can be complicated, competition can be complicated, the things you need to do can be complicated. So plan carefully so that you're doing the right things when you launch. And that's why we're here to talk about this today. Because if you don't plan how your business is going to work, it's not going to work. And our United States president of years ago, Abraham Lincoln, whose name everyone knows, once said, if you have 3 hours to cut down a tree, spend the first hour sharpening your saw. So today's lecture, if you will, is about sharpening the saw. What are the 12 things you need to do to have a good business plan? But before I launch on that, let me just take a minute to tell you who Simmet is and who I am. Simmet, as Simi mentioned, is the Consortium for the Improvement of Medicine. with innovation and technology. It's an organization that's been operating for, I'm going to say, around 30 years or so. And it was founded because it was recognized that there's all kinds of good technology and research and discoveries that are happening in universities and medical schools that are not making it out to the marketplace, not making it out and helping patients, because there are scientists and there are business people. So these very good discoveries often are not yielding the benefits that they can. So this organization was created to bring business people to help the researchers and scientists and faculty and students of medical schools and universities to bring their innovations to patients in the marketplace. And it was funded at first by the United States Congress, and that functioned for many years. And then at the end of that term, Simmet actually said to the members, has this been valuable to you? And they said, oh, yes, we brought all kinds of things to the marketplace that we otherwise would not have, or we brought them there faster or more effectively. So Simmet said, well, if you pitch in as subscribers, we can continue doing this. And they raised their hands and we're in, and we've been continuing to do this now for 30 years or so. We started in the Eastern US, but we now have organizations participating from around the world. So I'm very pleased to be part of that. I've been with Simmet myself about 10 years as what's called an Accelerator Executive, helping various faculty members, researchers, students start businesses. My other job is running a finance group that invests in and funds startups in the life sciences and healthcare delivery. We're called Mass Medical Angels. And I've been doing that also for about 10 years. And I'm an entrepreneur myself. I have started a bunch of businesses, and some have been nice successes, and some have been failures, frankly. So I speak to you with the experience of success and failure. And to give you an idea of the kinds of businesses that we might start and the kinds of challenges that are faced. In my own background, I'll tell you a couple of stories. And these stories are not a perfect match, maybe, for what you're thinking about, because I work in what I think of as the health sciences, as here in the College of Health Sciences. And to me, that sort of combines medical science projects and public health projects. And the stories I have today lean a little bit more towards the medical science. But for first-time entrepreneurs, it is more likely that your first-time startup will be in public health. But I think that's okay, because nobody's going to do exactly the story I tell you anyway. And I think the lessons are generalizable. They're the same kinds of challenges and same kinds of things you need to think about. So I'll tell you about a couple of interesting startups. The first one is in eye health or retina surgery. This happened a few years ago. A couple of residents at the medical school at Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary came to me with a business idea. They said, we're studying retina surgery at the medical school, and do you know how retina surgery is done? And of course, I did not. And they explained that when there's a vitrectomy, and people may know about this or not, but the retina detaches, the surgeons go into the eyeball and reattach the retina, but then they fill the eyeball with gas for purposes of keeping that repaired retina in place. So it sort of pushes against the repaired retina, and it keeps it dry also. So it's filled with gas. This is standard. This has been done for years. But it's not great. They said, the biggest problem is, and this looks ridiculous, but it's true, in the upper left, if you have this surgery, you have to remain face down for a week. 24 hours. 24 hours. Sleeping, eating, literally going to the bathroom. You have to keep your face down, because if you raise your face, the fluid that is now building up again in the eye naturally from tears as the gas gets absorbed will kind of get behind the retina. It'll get it wet. It risks detaching it again. And that happens a lot because it's really hard not to raise your head for a week. So a large percentage, about 10% of people have to come in again for another retina surgery. So they said, this is just awful. So they said, we have an idea. Do you think, Mr. Evans, this is a business idea? And their idea was a hydrogel that they were working on in the chemistry laboratory. And they said, we think instead we can fill the eye with this gel, and it will hold things in place and sort of semi-solid. It's solid but soft. And the big thing is will allow the patient then to raise his or her head, will be able to see and live comfortably for a week. And the idea is that the hydrogel breaks down over the course of 1 to 4 weeks, gets reabsorbed into the body naturally, and the person would have, they expected, both better results and greater comfort. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a winner. That could work. That could work. But tell me, I said, how many of these retina surgeries are there? And they told me, they said there are about 130,000 in the US, there are about 300,000 in the world, and so on and so forth. So in this story, you see a couple of the things you have to think about in a business plan. First of all and foremost, the unmet clinical need and or unmet patient need. Is there something that can be improved? Do I know from my experience that something doesn't work as well as it can? And these fellows who were retina surgeons said, boy, I see something that can be better. And then when I asked them, they had said, yeah, this market is big enough so there can really be a business here. So I'm pleased to say they're off and running. We funded them and they did the necessary chemistry. We did necessary animal studies, which I participated in. I did retina surgery myself on those poor rabbits. And now we're in human trials in Australia. This has been quite a nice success so far. And it had some of the nice elements of business planning. Here's another one. I don't know if I want to talk about immunology. If I can get to the immunology slide. Maybe somebody can help me get there. We go. Now, how many people here have taken a little bit of immunology? A few. I'm a physicist by background, and I found immunology the hardest subject I've ever encountered. Because some people in this room will know exactly what this is about, and for the average person, it scarcely makes sense. But this is a schematic of the adaptive immune system. So as compared to the innate immune system, which reacts to any infection immediately, it says, hey, there's something here that doesn't belong in the body. The adaptive immune system, we say is B-cell mediated, teaches the body, this is how vaccines work, teaches the body about a particular foreign invader so that it can muster antibodies in the future against it. So I'm not going to talk through this whole slide, but just to explain, on the left are so-called B cells. It's a part of the immune system. And they're sort of scouts. They, course through the body, they're looking to recognize foreign proteins and so forth. And upon recognizing an antigen that doesn't belong, which is that diamond right in the middle of the cartoon, they will then present that. The MHC is the major histocomplex. They'll then show that antigen to the T cells on the right and say, hey, this bad boy doesn't belong. And the T cells then proliferate, sometimes called killer T cells. The T cells proliferate and they go everywhere, and they're sort of the army and scoop these up. And some researchers at Harvard came to me with this idea, and they said, we have this business idea. We have ways to disrupt the communication between the B cell and the T cell so that the T cell doesn't get the message and it doesn't proliferate and it doesn't go out and do all these things. Now, the average person would think, well, that doesn't sound like such a good idea. I want my immune system to be strong. I want it to go out and get everything, be as strong as it possibly can. But the more experienced folks here at the College of Health Sciences will know that sometimes there are problems with an overactive immune system. There are times when you do, in fact, want to tell the immune system, hey, relax, let's not get carried away here. And the biggest set of reasons for that is so-called autoimmune diseases. People have a disorder that causes their immune system to be overactive. One of the most common of these is SLE or lupus, very common disease. But there are others, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis has an element of an autoimmune response. So there are all kinds of situations where you might want to tampen down the immune response. So I said to them, yeah, that's a good possible business idea. How much money is that going to take? Another question in a business plan. And they said, oh, lots of money. So we said, well, let's see if we can find that. Let's see if we can get animal data that shows this works that might encourage a big pharmaceutical company to come in. But there's a second reason that may or may not have occurred to anybody so far why you want to dampen the immune response sometimes. And that's in the case of organ transplants. Now, organ transplants are not very common, but inhibiting the immune response is very, very important because, of course, if you put your lungs into my body recognizes, wait a minute, there's some proteins here that were not mine and wants to react to that. So we have so-called immunosuppressant drugs that permit organ transplants. They work pretty well, but they don't work very well, and there are all kinds of side effects. Now, that is a little bit less attractive as a business model, mostly because the organ transplant business is small. There are not a lot of organ transplants that take place. Kidney is the most common. There's also liver, heart, lungs, and so forth. And there are two reasons, I would say, why organ transplants are not more common. One is that it is a really sophisticated bit of surgery and medicine. It doesn't happen in a lot of places. You need sophisticated tertiary medical care centers, and of course, they're not to be found everywhere in large areas. Now, do people here know where the first human heart transplant was performed? Does anybody know that? It was in Africa. It was in 1969. Dr. Christian Bernard performed the first human heart transplant in the world, in history, here in Africa. And since then, we human beings do a few thousand heart transplants a year, which is not a lot, really. I mean, 1,000 sounds like a big number, but I'm talking about the whole population of the globe. So it's not really that much. So some of it is that a sophisticated medical center is needed, but another is that there are not a lot of organs available. I mean, if somebody needs a heart or a kidney or lungs, you've got to get it from a very healthy person who unfortunately has just died. And that doesn't happen a lot. Which brings me to another story of innovation. And that is that some folks ask the question, gee, is it possible now that we're learning how to do engineering of biology, can we not engineer a human compatible heart in a non-human animal, in a sheep, a pig, a goat, so that we can actually have sources of organs for human beings? And that effort is going on around the world right now. People are working on that. And there are a couple of companies that I'm not involved with that are pretty far along on that. And that became relevant just about 6 months ago for this guy, David Bennett, the older guy in the middle of the photo. He is in very ill health, 57 years old, but ill health in a lot of ways. He had kidney disease, he had heart failure, he had lung failure, and he applied for a heart transplant. And the agency that does transplants said, not likely, Mr. Bennett. First of all, get to the back of the line. There's a long waiting list. And secondly, we're probably not going to give you the heart because you're in terrible health. I mean, we don't know if you're going to last that long. And there are healthy people who need hearts. And with a new heart, they can live for 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years. And we see that from time to time. In fact, in Boston, you see Boston Marathon runners sometimes that wear a little shirt that they're actually heart transplant recipients. So he was not going to get a heart, and he was frankly very close to dying, and that was part of the reason he wasn't going to. And he said, can you put one of those sheep or pig hearts into me? And I said, no. Well, the regulatory authorities are not going to allow that. And he said, look, I'm going to die anyway. Maybe I can do this for science. And in a very complicated set of conversations, the researchers at the University of Maryland who had engineered a pig heart for humans said, we're going to need a really strong immunosuppressant drug if this human heart is not going to reject, if this human body is not going to reject a pig heart. And we said, we've got one. We think we've got a good one. Because we actually, I say we, this company I was involved with, I was CEO, but I didn't invent this, had done an experiment where we had taken pig hearts and put them into baboons. And the baboons were doing just fine. We said to FDA, we have some human data to show that this is safe, but in healthy people, and we have some animal data to show that it works. We don't yet have any human data to show that it's safe and works. And Mr. Bennett said, sign me up. And the FDA said, so they lived 2 years and none have lived longer. And we said, hey, we just put it in 2 years ago. Not enough time has elapsed. So ultimately, and people in the room in the medical school may or may not know the story, but FDA and the regulatory authorities permitted it. And Mr. David Bennett received a pig heart late last year. I think it was around Christmas. And it took. Our drug suppressed his immune response sufficiently, and his pig heart worked and kept him alive for an extended period of time. It's really pretty neat. We have a long way to go with this still, but the first human has received an animal organ and succeeded. So innovation has many faces, and this is a complicated thing that that I couldn't do personally, but it's neat. It's a pretty neat story, and it makes me optimistic about the future. So you have a different idea probably. Now you're an entrepreneur and you're excited. You say, okay, I'm hatching an idea. And you know a couple of things. You know that being an entrepreneur is hard. You know that it's hard. It's maybe even harder than medical school. You know, for example, that most startups fail. It's a really hard business. And if you don't know that, let me tell you that right now. Most startups fail. So that's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to face. But you know another thing. You're not going to fail. You're going to be in the 20% that succeeds. And you should think that. Every entrepreneur should have optimism and encouragement and excitement, and you should believe in what you're doing. Now, why do these other 80% fail, though? What's going on with them? Well, there are a few possibilities. There are a few reasons that a startup might fail, and I've seen all of these. But the first one, looking back to see if the first one doesn't happen that often, that the technology fails. Because if you have an idea to start a business, you've probably been working with the technology, you've seen it succeed in limited situations. So of course this happens if the technology fails, but that's not the main reason. And neither is the second one, that the entrepreneurs don't work hard enough. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you have energy and ambition and you just want to go do it. So sometimes entrepreneurs are lazy, but I'm not sure I've ever met one. And, the idea was stupid? Well, probably not. I mean, stupid ideas are part of brainstorming. You come up with a bunch of ideas and some are stupid, but typically you follow the good ideas. So that's not it. What I've seen happen is that people don't have a good business plan. They're excited about a discovery and they haven't spent the time to think, what does the customer need? How does this fit in with what the customer needs? What does the patient need? What does the doctor need? How does this help the situation? Who's going to pay for it? How do I make it? How do I get it to them? How much money do I need to get the business started? They haven't thought about all those things, and they race out and get going, and then they find that there's something they should have thought of before. So I would say that this is really the lesson for you today. Let's plan on what you need. Here's my little staircase model. And this shows the traps that you might fall into starting a business. Because the way I think of it, my little shorthand is, a good technology or science does not necessarily make for a good product. And even a good product does not necessarily make for a good business. And that may be a little surprising, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And then the final step, which we may not be so interested in yet this morning, is that even a good business is not necessarily a good investment for an outside investor. Maybe good for the entrepreneur, but not necessarily a good investment. So I'll talk a little bit more about these. How can this be? How can you have a good technology that's not a good product? Well, I'll give you a couple of quick stories about this. They're true stories. I met an investigator in Boston who had a business idea. She said to me, I have a new approach for allergic anaphylaxis, which is to say the reaction that people have if you're very allergic to something like nuts. Nuts people really, their bodies blow up, the airway blows up. I mean, it can be fatal. And the immediate therapy for that is typically an injection of adrenaline or epinephrine. And there are chronic therapies to help people from getting in those situations. and I was learning about this as the entrepreneur, the business person helping. I didn't know too much about this. I read a little bit about it. I met with her. And she shows me some data that it's been helpful in various animal models. And I said, I've learned a little bit about this. There are other products out there. Compared to the standard, how does yours work? And she says, compared to the competition, my innovation is a little bit worse. And I said, well, okay, maybe you have, better side effect profile. It doesn't work quite as well, but the side effects are worse. She said, Mr. Evans, compared to the competition, my side effect profile is a little bit worse. And I said, well, why are you so excited about this? I had my silly businessman's hat on. She said, well, this is a whole novel, innovative mechanism of action. And that actually is really important in a science way. That's a very good thing. And I really admire her. She has advanced the frontiers of human knowledge. She has helped us human beings understand better how the body works. It's really great. And I said to her, you should get some papers out of this. This is really terrific. We now understand that complicated immune system better. But this is not a product. We're not going to spend lots of money to launch a product that's worse than anything else out there. So that was an idea of a good science that is not a good product. And another one was an investigator who was doing some work in Southeast Asia. And she found a really, really interesting pattern. The kids who were infected with a particular parasitic worm did not get asthma, ever at all. I mean, the data were really clean. There were a lot of kids with asthma, and none of them were infected with this parasitic worm. And there are a lot of kids infected with parasitic worm, and none of them had asthma. It was really clean. I mean, this was really powerful. And she was very excited about this, and I think appropriately so. And I met with her, and I'm thinking, how are you going to make this product? Can you isolate whatever the secretions are of this worm? Do you know what they are? Can you isolate? What do you do? Have a worm farm? I mean, how exactly is this going to work? Or can you maybe synthesize this and provide a synthetic drug that does the effect that somehow this worm provides? And she said, well, I don't really know how it works. So I said, well, what's your business idea? How are you going to make money at this? And she said, well, I'm going to go to a mother and I'm going to say, you give me $20 and I will infect your baby with parasitic worms. And I said, I don't think that's the greatest business idea. So I said, I'll take a pass on that one. Those are two examples of how very good science, in both cases, very good, important science. And this was not bad work, it was very good work, where it didn't really yield a product. What might be a little bit harder to understand is why a good product wouldn't be a good business. So I have a few quick examples of that. One is related to gum surgery. This is not a rare thing. Sometimes a person's gums recede, and that can be because of some gum disease, or it even happens with age. The gums recede, and the dentist or the oral surgeon says, I have to enhance these gums with a little bit of a transplant, if you will, put a little tissue in the gums to strengthen that up. And the way they typically do that is actually to harvest some material from the soft palate, from the patient's own mouth. And this inventor, this innovator, had a great idea for an acellular dermal matrix. Now, let's spend time into where that comes from or what it does, but the idea is that it can come in a package, and you don't actually have to cut out a piece of the top of the roof of your mouth to enhance your gums. And that sounded like a great idea to me. I've never had the surgery, but I know people who have. It's not that rare. And they say the gum surgery isn't so bad. Cutting out a piece of the top of your mouth is terrible. They say you don't want to eat, you don't want to drink. That's just awful. So this seemed like a great idea. And it is a good product, but it wasn't a good business because the dentists and the oral surgeons were not so interested in that. They said, look, this is what I do. I harvest some tissue from the roof of the mouth and it works great. I said, well, but the patient says it hurts. Well, but it works great. And now you're telling me I should absorb an additional cost into this procedure? How much is your product going to cost? And I have a capitated rate for taking care of these people. The economics were not working for the customer. And I don't want to spend a lot of time in the story, but the key thing is the economics didn't work for the customer, who was not really the patient, it was the doctor. We're saying the doctor, buy this supply, and the doctor said, no thanks. So that was not a good business. I've got another product for you that I think is a good product, but turned out not to be such a great business. Oops, filled, but didn't. This is visual field testing. So here's what people normally do on the left. And you may or may not have had this experience, but you go to the eye doctor, sit down, you put your face in this big machine, and they say, look straight ahead. Can you see this thing on the left? Can you see this thing on the right? They do various eye tests. And these innovators are from Germany, said, boy, hardware and software have developed to the point where we could do this with virtual reality goggles. Put on these goggles, look around, what do you see? Check all these things. And I'll tell you, it works. It's good stuff. And they went to the ophthalmologists, the optometrists, the eye doctors, and said, look at this cool thing we've got. And all the doctors said, that is really cool. Thanks for coming. And they said, no, don't you want to buy one of these? And they said, well, I'm not sure I want to buy one. Why do I want to buy one? They said, well, because it is so cool. And the doc said, well, do I still need one of these big machines? Or can I buy that instead? And they said, well, you do still need one of the big machines because it does this. So they said, well, thank you. Call me again next year. That was not good because, again, the economics didn't work for the customer. It didn't provide any real advantage for the doctor. Very cool product, very, very cool product, but not a sensible business. And here's another one that people may be more familiar with. We call this for short in America PICC, P-I-C-C, peripherally inserted central catheter, which means a catheter inserted in the periphery limb in the arm that is then threaded through the body till it gets to a central place to deliver drugs that need to go to a central place because they're very strong, often corrosive kinds of drugs. Chemotherapy fits into this category. You can't really inject chemotherapy directly into a vein. It'll cause harm. So you want to get it in the big, strong vena cava or near the vena cava junction. So commonly, this little tube, a catheter, people in this room are very familiar with catheters, gets threaded through the arm and into the right place. And the way this is done, the high-tech way this is done at the Harvard Medical School teaching hospitals, is to take the tape measure and say, okay, how long's your arm? And guess and thread it through, and then send the patient for an x-ray to see if it's in the right place. And a fourth of the time, it's not in the right place. That, oops, too far. Oops, not far enough. So they have to take it out and do it over again. And these inventors, surgeons, said, what if we put a bright light at the end of the catheter? It could actually track it through the body in a dimly lighted room. And that actually works. It's a great product. It's a great product. They made a few. It actually works. But unfortunately, this was not a great business idea either. And that's because hospitals don't want to entertain somebody who has one product. Hospitals, they need to buy everything. They need to buy bandages and splints and dressings. They need instruments. They need all kinds of things. And they don't have time to talk to somebody who has one product. Not to mention the competitors will say, yeah, mine doesn't have a light on it, but I tell you what, you buy all my stuff, I'll throw it in free. But there's no way for them to get a foothold in the market with one product. So unfortunately, that was not a success either. So the lesson takes us back to the staircase. You need to launch a business, not just good technology, a good product, but a good business that makes sense. You need, I'm going to say, about 12 things to work out to have a good business. And we'll start to talk about those now. I'll take you through the 12 things that I think are critical to a successful business. The first is the unmet clinical need. And we talked about that a little already in some of these examples. That is, what are the patients not currently getting? Or the doctor. We could be making the physician's life easier, or the nurse, or the technician. But what's the unmet medical need? And sometimes the way we investors think about this, what we hear at pitch is, what are you telling me about? Is it oxygen or aspirin or jewelry? Meaning, is it something you need to live? Or is it something that's very, very helpful? Or is it something that everybody wants, but it's not necessarily critical to healthcare? The size of the market opportunity is really important in business. And a lot of very, very smart medical people, when thinking about a business idea, will not necessarily recognize this. But it takes money to start a business, so we would like to think that there's money that will then come in. But if you have something very specialized that only applies in a few cases, that is a very challenging business to launch. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but you have to think very hard about how those economics will work. And getting the size of the market can be difficult. Sometimes if you're selling something, you're replacing something that already exists, and you can say, well, the market for scalpels is 20,000 scalpels a year. I have a better scalpel. It's a more ergonomic handle. So I know it's 20,000 a year. But sometimes you're inventing something that nobody else has, so it's a little bit hard to know. So then you have to look at number of procedures. How many times is something done? How many patients need this sort of thing? And I would warn you to think about the use of your invention. I've had entrepreneurs pitch me as an investor with their business ideas, and they're all eager to say it's a huge business. So I had a company come to me from Estonia not long ago with some software, a good software idea. They said, with the advent of machine learning, artificial intelligence, better software, our software can look at mammograms, breast x-rays, and can pick out what look like they might be tumors. And this can be very helpful to the doctor. And I said, that sounds interesting. How big a market is that? I said, the market for mammography is $40 billion. And I said, yes, but that includes the mammography. You're not actually taking the pictures. This is additional software that you're selling on top of that. So I need to know, how many mammography centers are there and how many do they do? And your cost is going to come on top of that, so that you're going to have to tell me about your economics. The exact same thing happened to me recently with a company that had a very interesting idea for blood typing, a small portable blood typer that would be done in an ambulance. And blood typing typically is done in a hospital. It's a kind of big and expensive machine. And the idea, of course, as I think everyone in this room knows, is you have to give somebody the right blood type, or a clot can be difficult. But there is a type that works for everybody, so-called universal donor, O negative. I'm pleased to be one of those, who can give blood to anybody. So what an ambulance will typically do is carry some O negative blood so they can give it to the trauma victim, car crash or whatever. And then at the hospital, you find out what blood type the person actually has, and then can give them the exact match. But the O negative blood, of course, is very expensive. It's very special. So it'd be great if you could know the blood type in the ambulance. So I thought, well, this is interesting. I'm not sure how valuable that is. Depends on the cost of this blood. I'm not sure. I'm skeptical about this one, but maybe. How big is that market? I asked him. He said, the market for blood transfusions is $10 billion. But he was making the same mistake. That market includes the blood. So the blood is still needed. He's not going to replace the blood. So that similarly was not a good idea of market size. And then, of course, your proposed product, your proposed solution, I should say, which might be a product, it might be a service. This is usually what launches an entrepreneur on his or her journey. I would just caution you, be a little bit careful. I always like it when the entrepreneur starts with the need and says, I saw this problem, I worked, I found a solution. Sometimes it works when you start with the solution first. But not necessarily. Sometimes we call it technology push. You're trying to find somebody to buy something that's not necessarily needed. A couple more things. Strategy, the competition, and where you are positioned versus the competition. And I would ask, as an investor, do you have any data in support of this? It could be okay if you don't. I mean, it could be that you're making this up. You haven't tried it yet. You have this idea. Maybe you need a little money to do some experiments. It's okay if you don't have data, but of course, it's much better if you do. It's much better if you say, I am better because I am faster, cheaper, whatever. And I would assert to you, and this does not appear on the slide, but it's maybe one of my key points of the day, is I would assert that there are three sources of competitive advantage in healthcare. There are three ways that you can succeed or be better. The first is to deliver better clinical outcomes. You actually help people get better, faster, more often. mean, that is the single most important way to distinguish yourself and to deliver value in healthcare. I would assert that the second way, though, is reduce costs. And that is very valuable, too, to a healthcare system, right? If I can do the same thing for you, keep you as healthy, prevent malaria, whatever it is I'm trying to do, and I can do it less expensively, that is a valuable thing. And patients, governments, ministries, insurers will pay for that. And then the third of the three things I would say that you can create value and distinguish yourself in healthcare is improved access. And sometimes improved access is a matter of lower cost, the second thing. But sometimes it means your idea is portable. You have an ultrasound machine that's smaller, that can go somewhere. Maybe it doesn't need electricity. Maybe it doesn't need to be refrigerated. So all these things allow me to go places with my solution that I otherwise might not be able to do, and provide that solution to other people. So I would suggest those are the three ways that you can distinguish yourself and create value. The regulatory path, I think, is obvious, something you have to think about. Some healthcare businesses will be quite strictly regulated and some less so, and that changes, and it depends where you are and the various levels of government. But you cannot fail to consider that in your business plans. That's an important element. And the sixth one is the protections of your idea. You don't have a good business idea if, as soon as you start, it's really easy for people to copy it. You need to feel confident that your business can be out in front and ahead of other people. And there are various ways to do that. One is intellectual property, or IP as we call it, patents and so forth. But that's just one way. Another is trade secrets. You don't tell people how it is that you do this secret thing. And another is, you put in place particular capabilities that are hard for people to duplicate. But in all of these cases, you don't want to be the one who gets out in front, does all the hard work, figures it all out, and then somebody else comes and does the same thing. That's not a good business model. Now, it would be a good thing for a government or not-for-profit model, but it's not good for business to spend a lot of money and then somebody else gets all the customers. The business economics are, of course, critical. Your budget, how do the numbers work out, the economics like? And it's very common for very professional, very competent, terrific medical personnel not to understand business economics very well, because you don't do that. That's not your world. You're experts at one thing, you're not experts at another thing. But for the business, you have to sort of understand how these economics work. Let's say I'm doing COVID diagnostic tests, for example, and I'm running a little clinic. I'm doing COVID diagnostics. It costs me $1 to buy the test from the supplier, who, let's say, comes from Ghana, and I sell it for $2. So I buy it for $1, I sell it for $2. That means I'm making a $1, we say, profit margin on each one. Doesn't mean your business is profitable, but it means on each test you're making a $1 margin. So if you have fixed costs of, let's say, $300 a week for your rent, for your staff, that means, as I think you'll follow, you have to sell 300 of these tests per week to break even. And each of the tests make $1 that then helps you cover your so-called overhead. So you're breaking even at 300 tests. Bought them for $300, you sold them for $600, $300 margin, $300 overhead costs, you're breaking even. Now, once you get past that, you're making money. That's the kind of economics you need to understand as an entrepreneur. Where's my break-even point? When do I make money? What are my margins like? What are my costs? It doesn't have to get terribly complicated. I mean, if you understand your revenue and your costs and your overhead, you're 80% of the way there. The go-to-market plan is important because it is the final step between you and the customer. There was this smart guy in Massachusetts, where we're from, Ralph Waldo Emerson, in the 19th century, said, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will be a path to your door. It's such a great saying, and I'm here to tell you it's completely wrong. It's just not true. If you have a better mousetrap and nobody knows about it, and nobody's going to be a path to your door, and if it costs a little more, they'll say, I'll stick with the old mousetrap. Business is not that simple. Ralph Waldo Emerson was not a businessman. Great guy, great writer. I recommend him. Good thinker, philosophical guy, but he was not a businessman. So you'll need to think gee, I invented this COVID test. It cost me $1 to make it. I can sell it for $2. I have $1 margin. I'll ask you, well, wait a minute. How does the test get to the patient? Is it in a store? Is it in a clinic? Do you have a sales force? I mean, all of those things are additional costs. So you need to figure out where that fits in. The capital plan means how much money will this take to get started. And my only piece of advice there is to make sure you're thinking about all the money you'll need to get started, because it's very tempting to go to your uncle at the holiday and say, I need $200 to get my business started. And he says, well, $200, maybe okay. And then you take your $200 and the next holiday you see, I need $200 more. So figure out you need $400 to get started. I need $200 now and I need $200 later. You don't have a plan. How much money does it take to set things up, maybe to buy, desks or equipment or so forth. Exit is important really only if you're going to have outside investors. What that means is when we say exit is when are you personally as an entrepreneur going to exit the business, or how are the investors going to exit? And maybe you're not going to. Maybe you intend to run this business forever, which is terrific. So exit may not apply. The investor wants to know though how he or she gets their money back, because they're hoping to make an investment and bring something back. So that's what exit means. It means what's the return. Then the last couple of things. The team is of course critical. Some of my investment colleagues will say the team is the most important thing. They'll say, we have kind of silly cliches. My colleagues simply say, I bet on the jockey, not the horse, they say. Meaning, I bet on the person who's running this, because that's what matters. I think it is important because if it's hard for us on the outside to know how good the business idea is, but the executives running it have a very good idea. So, if you trust them, then you're inclined to think that's a good investment. When you pull together your team as an entrepreneur, you want people you know and trust. But I would say make sure you understand your business idea pretty well before assembling the team, because the business idea will drive what kind of team you need. Do I need a phlebotomist, or do I need a cardiologist, or do I need a salesman? I mean, until you know what your business is, you're not quite sure who should be on the team. So I would say let the business drive the team. And finally, the deal only applies if, obviously, if you're seeking outside investment. So you say to your uncle, Charles, at the holiday, you give me $200, you can have 10% of my business. And then that may or may not make sense for Uncle Charles. So the deal terms can be important if you're seeking outside investment. So this is a lot, isn't it? I mean, it's a fair amount of stuff. I mean, it's 12 things by my count. People can do it a little bit differently. There's a lot of stuff. And it's pretty hard, but it's not really hard. And the good news is we're here to help you with it. The Healer program that Simi mentioned, this new program that we're launching this year. Healthcare entrepreneurship advancement leveraging research. The whole idea is to help entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs get their businesses going in Liberia. So we're going to offer, just as Simi was describing, regular classes, lectures, seminars, and so forth. There will be homework assignments that we will work on interactively with you, which might be something like, let's write the financial plan. And there'll be a lecture on what that includes. And then you'll go do some homework, and sit down with us, the teachers, and we'll work out together your financial plan. And then there'll be individual mentoring too, when you can come in, meet with your coaches, and say, here's the thing I'd like to talk about. Here's the thing I'd like to learn about. And as Simi mentioned, there are 3 tracks. The first we're calling Ideation. And this is for people who want to be entrepreneurs and maybe you haven't identified your idea yet. Maybe you have the beginnings of an idea. So this track is mostly about how to be an entrepreneur. What are the things I need to learn? What are the things I need to think about? What are the things that make a business? It might even be that you're not planning to launch a business, but you think this is good material to know. maybe I want to launch a business in the future. Or maybe this will help me do a better job in my company, just to understand how entrepreneurs work. So this is for aspiring entrepreneurs. And it's not easy. This is going to be a 12-week course. We're taking three meetings per week. So it's pretty intensive, but you will learn a lot. You can start at ground zero and come out as an entrepreneur. So I think this will be a good course. The second we're calling creation. And this is for people who have a little bit of a business idea already. Maybe you have the beginnings of a business plan. Maybe you've started down the path already to launching your business. And we will help you be more rigorous and disciplined about this and go through those 12 elements and lay out a real business plan. And this is also, frankly, pretty intensive. This course is going to take about 6 months with one meeting a week of about an hour or so, but with homework and also, it's a lot of work. And the third track we call implementation, which is for operating businesses. You've already got a business, you already own pharmacy or clinic or whatever it is you're doing. And you're saying, gee, let me take advantage of this coaching and let me come in and ask you a question because I'm having this challenge in my business. Or I have an opportunity. I'm wondering, should I expand to Cote d'Ivoire? So you have something you want to talk about, and this is very customized. So those are 3 tracks. We're quite excited about offering this. And I'll leave you with just one idea for what might be a little bit of humor. I don't know if anybody recognizes this guy. This is not my father. This is a famous Russian writer, Lev Tolstoy. In the 19th century, he wrote many novels that are well regarded even now, 200 years later, 150 years later. In Europe, he wrote War and Peace. He wrote Anna Karenina. And Anna Karenina, he wrote in Russian, of course, which I don't read, but he's a big name in literature. Anna Karenina famously starts with a line that says, all happy families are alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. So I have modified that to talk about business plans in that every business plan, all successful businesses, I guess I say, all successful businesses are alike in that they have an identified need, they have a market size, they have a solution, they have finances that work, they have a capital plan, they have a team, et cetera, et cetera. They're all like, a successful business has those 12 things working nicely. Unsuccessful businesses, well, one has a product that doesn't work, and one has a product that works, but the market's too small, and another one, the market's good, the product is good, the team is fighting with each other, and so on and so forth. So I thought this line from Anna Karenina was a good way to sort of sum up a successful business and a successful business plan. So that is all I've got for you this morning. I hope that was a little bit helpful, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Eric, but we're not totally done with you yet. We're supposed to have a short sessions for Q&A. Yes, since there will not be much time to entertain a question. I want to apologize to the first 2-3 pews on the side. I understand that the air conditioning is so hot and it's embarrassing. I've been trying to get the remote. I'm so sorry, but I can't just have it. And this side too. So, sorry. I'm trying to get the remote, and then we'll handle that. I'm so sorry. But again, we can't turn it up. Silence, please. We're not done yet. That was just my apologies. Sorry. We're trying to get a remote, and we can't turn it off because the room will be too hot. So we can just increase the heat more. Silence. This session is still on. Hello? Yeah, thank you. So sorry about that. We'll attend to that. The session is still on. We want to use about 10 or 20 minutes to entertain questions and answer. So just ask the questions on the presentation, and Eric will help you with the answer. Okay? Thank you.
I'm glad we have time for this. I was afraid I was telling too many stories and was running out of time. Yes, sir. You have a question. Oh boy, that's a good question. The question is there a difference between an entrepreneur and a business owner? That's really an insightful question. I would say yes, there is, but it's kind of subtle. Someone very often is a business owner and an entrepreneur. I think that happens a lot. But sometimes you can be one and not the other. You can be a business owner who, let's say, inherited business from your family, and you just run it as it goes and you don't change it. And to me, that would not be an entrepreneur, because you're not thinking about what can I deliver, how can I expand my offering to people, how can I help more people, there's no innovation in that. So in my opinion, that would be a business owner who's not an entrepreneur. He or she is not innovating. And then on the other side, I would say there can be entrepreneurs who are not business owners, who maybe work in a company. Maybe they work for a big company, maybe they work in a hospital, and you get paid a salary. And you go to the chief of nursing, you say, I have an idea for a way we can do this better. Instead of working this way Monday through Friday with this equipment, what if we did this differently, and so on and so forth. So I think it's possible to be an entrepreneur and not a business owner. It's possible to be a business owner and not an entrepreneur, although often it's the same. Really interesting question. Thank you for that. Yes, sir, first, and then you.
And sometimes it's a new idea, a whole new idea to on the market. And this could be seen that there is no visible or viable kind of a competition. So in preparing a business plan, how does an entrepreneur come out to identify his competition or his competitor at that point in time? Because you know, to my question.
Yep, excellent question. Another very sophisticated question. The question was, if you're innovating and doing something new, how can you think about market size or competition? Because there really is no competition yet, because you're inventing something new. And that's correct and a smart question. I would say that to me, who looks at a lot of business plans every week, there's always competition. It may just be a different kind of solution. I ask, what are the people doing now instead of your idea? So, for example, somebody invents the automobile. They say, well, there's no competition. There's never been an automobile before, and now I've invented it. I would say, well, your competition is the horse. People are riding around on horses. So I would ask, what do people do now to solve that problem? That's how I think about competition when you invent something brand new. It might be, completely different. Maybe they stay home. Maybe they suffer. But there's what's the alternative path is the way I think about it. So it may not be exactly competitive product, but it's a competitive sort of solution or pathway. Yes, sir.
Because for most of the things that goes into the plan, a single person cannot be specialized in all of them. And so as we sit here, it's possible that people are specialized in different areas, or maybe I have a team or a group. Is that possible to have your program looking at groups that want to partner in terms of what they do?
Yes. Let me make sure I understand your question correctly. I think you said, regarding this mentorship, entrepreneurs will have different questions. They'll be working in different areas, and some specialization is needed. No mentor can know all these things. Did I understand the question correctly? Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's a very good point. I would say there are two answers to that, and I think both have validity. One is, many of the questions I think are to starting a business are not that specific, in that your financial statement may be very, very specific to your business, but Mike Dempsey knows all about how you create financial statements. Your customer needs. Jenna, Paul, Mike, or I can help you say, how do we engage our customers to figure out what they need, what they'll pay, and so forth? So partly the answer is, although your solution is very specialized, the questions in getting at them are not necessarily specialized. And the other part of the answer is, we're going to do our best to have specialists. We're going to try to have, not one mentor taking care of everybody, but we're going to try to have, mentor in, I don't know what, midwifery and pharmaceuticals and rural clinics or whatever. So we'll do our best to offer specialists, and then I think many answers are general. Yes, sir.
Thanks for the presentation, Eric. I got a question about the courses that you guys, the 6-month course. How well embedded is it in the reality or the business reality of Liberia? Because I know, like, with business in Liberia is a whole different thing, right? So, like, in terms of like the data for initial assessment, it might not be available. So I'm really curious to see how adaptable it is in the reality of Liberia. Thank you.
Right. Let me make sure that I heard your question correctly. You were saying to me, "Gee, Eric, this is very nice theoretically, but on a practical basis, how can we necessarily do all these things in a place where maybe the data are hard to get?" Fair?
Right. And like, even like, we could take it to another extent. Some businesses in Liberia operate at the expense of family members. That is not like a realistic factor to like take into business that is done in America. So how are we aware of all of these like different dimensions?
Right. Okay. I think now it's 2 questions. Let me see if I address them correctly. Regarding the data, you're absolutely right. Of course, it can be very hard to get the data you want. And I'll tell you, I think that's true everywhere in the world. If you're an entrepreneur, you can almost never get the data you want. You want to know how many of these things are sold or happen or procedures. And you want to look it up, and there's nowhere to find it. So that is always very hard. I suspect it is harder in Liberia than in some other places, but it's always hard. So you have to construct your own model, and you have to say, okay, there are 2 big hospitals in Monrovia. They do 60% of these urological procedures, maybe, and that's the majority in the country. So let's say that represents half the market. Let me call up somebody know one of these hospitals and say, how many of these do you do? I don't know really. And you say, well, give me an idea. I don't know really. Well, 40? That sounds high, right? 30? Yeah, 30 might be all right. Okay, 30, write down 30 in this hospital, 30 in this hospital. You start to create your model and you create your own data. So it's hard, you're right, but to be a good entrepreneur, you have to have some sense. And your numbers are not going to be precise. They might not even be right, but you have to do your best so you're not betting on the wrong horse. If I understood the second part of your question, it was about businesses sometimes being supported by family. Did I understand correctly? Yeah. And I think it is very reasonable to say, to start a business, I'm going to need to tap family members or friends, or sometimes we jokingly say in the US, F, and F will provide my money to start. Family, friends, and fools. So it's reasonable to say that. And I noticed my Uncle Charles left once we started asking for money here. The guy I was kidding with about getting money. So I think that it's reasonable to say I may have to go to family to get some money to start. However, what I would say is not reasonable is to say this is a business and my family needs to keep putting money into it every year, year after year after year after year after year. I would say that's not a business, that's a charity. Now that's okay, charities are good, but that's not then a business, I would say. A business plan says at some point, maybe it takes 2 years, but at some point more money is coming in than going out. Another question, yes.
Yeah. My name is Gilbert Crickwell.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Yes, sir.
Let me say thank you for your brilliant deliberation. In Africa, and most especially in Liberia, starting a business, becoming an entrepreneur is a little weird due to the capital. And you spoke lengthily about innovation. There are a lot of young Liberians who are highly innovative but don't have the moral support and the financial support to pursue their dream. Some years back, a boy invented excavator using syringe, the syringe that we use to give injection, and place cool air water in it. So you see, like the hydraulics, you see it move up, down, and back and forth. But that kid is somewhere way in the rural area. What would you say to motivate such person who want to venture into innovation and don't have the means, they have the idea, they know what they want to do, but don't have the means or to pitch them to what they're supposed to get?
Yeah, this is a very good question. If I understood you correctly, you said, gee, there are a lot of entrepreneurial people with innovative ideas who find it hard to launch a business because they don't have the support, the moral support, personal support, financial support. But what can they do? You have identified one of the real challenges to starting a business in Liberia or anywhere, and that's getting the capital to start. So I am not going to pretend that that just goes away or I have any magic response. It is hard to get the capital to start. And this is why the business plan becomes important, because you can say to yourself, once you have your business plan, how much capital do I need? And how much capital do I need to do what? So you mentioned an idea, if I understood you correctly, about a syringe, an innovative idea for a syringe that could be manipulated a little differently and more easily. That sounds pretty neat to me, pretty innovative, and I can imagine pretty valuable, and I can imagine a pretty big market. Because syringes are used all the time. So there's somebody with a good idea. So how do I get that started? If where am I going to get the capital? How am I going to do that? Well, I would say, let's try a couple of plans. One possibility is, in the most ambitious plan, you say, I'm going to build a factory to make these syringes, and I need, $3 million. And then we say, okay, where are we going to find $3 million? But now, that's plan A, if you will. Plan B is something, let's say, less ambitious. And you can even have a plan C that says, this is a really terrific design, and my business idea is to take this design and license it to a syringe company. And then I don't need $3 million. I'm not putting up a factory. Maybe I'm not even going to manufacture this. Maybe I'm going to go to the syringe company and say, let's manufacture this together. I have this design, and I've protected it somehow. I have this design. You will like this design. You can make more money on it. You'll get market share, whatever the pitch is. So let's be business partners, if you will. It's a collaboration between the entrepreneur and an existing company to fund a new design idea. So that's another possible answer. Very good question. Yes.
Yeah, I'm Tatos
Last
Entule.
question.
I'm Tatos Entule. I want to know what makes entrepreneurship important in the healthcare sector.
Wow, great question. What makes entrepreneurship important in the healthcare sector? Everyone in this room might have an opinion about that. I'll take a shot at it. I think entrepreneurship is important in the healthcare sector because it's what advances humankind and the social good. I think it is because of entrepreneurs that we have the healthcare we have today. People who thought about new ways to diagnose problems, new ways of doing imaging, new possible therapies, new devices to make things easier. I think healthcare is where it is today, in my opinion, not a factual answer, but in my opinion, healthcare is where it is today in 2022 instead of where it was, let's say, in 1822, because of so many entrepreneurs around the world turning their minds to solutions, to existing clinical problems. How can I do this better for the patient? How can I solve this problem for the doctor? How can we alleviate this condition? So I think it is the work of many, many entrepreneurs all over the world that helps healthcare advance year after year and allows us to provide better healthcare for so many people. That would be my personal opinion.
Oh, Eric, sorry, I have the last question here. It's from the screening room. Sorry, there can be any
person.
Fine, so the question is, what if I as an entrepreneur, I have the right idea, but do not have the right team to start a business? What is the fate or success of this business? Right idea.
Okay, good question. This has been a terrific group. You guys, every single question has been a good one. This one is, you're an entrepreneur with a good idea, but you don't have the team. And I think I'm going to give a little bit of a two-part answer to that too. Eventually, the first part is that eventually you need the team. And then you're not really going to be able to implement your plan without a team. But you don't necessarily need the entire team in place at the very beginning. You can have some gaps in the team and say, boy, we're going to need a salesperson. You could say, I'm a nerdy scientist and my partner's a nerdy finance person, and we need somebody who's extroverted and is going to go out and sell. So I don't have the team in place, but I recognize what I need and I can describe that. and I can say, when am I going to need this person? We're not selling yet. We're going to be selling in the fall. And your investors, your collaborators, even your friends can help you fill those gaps in the team. So it's a very good question. And I would say you do need the team eventually, but you can have a plan to build the team.
And the last question here for this session would be, how does a medical personnel use entrepreneurship in their field of study?
How do medical personnel use entrepreneurship in their field of study?
Yeah.
Well, I think this gets to what is sometimes called intrapreneurship with an I. What we're mostly talking about today is entrepreneurs launching businesses, starting a business of your own. And to that very good question about the difference between an entrepreneur and a business owner, mostly we've been talking about starting a business of your own. That would be yours. But this entrepreneurial thinking that we're discussing, what makes a business work? How are the economics attractive to the doctor? How does it help the patient? What's the advantage of bringing better clinical outcomes or lower costs, improved access? All that kind of thinking can be applied in your field, even if you're a hospital employee, a clinic employee. So you can apply that in your field without having to leave your job and go start a business, if that doesn't suit you. But I think the same questions can be asked and can yield value in your field and at your company.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. Sorry, viewing room, I couldn't take all your questions because we have the next session to go through, and it's another hour or so of presentation. I want to say thank you for us, those of us participating here. I've been going around, and we're also quiet, so attentive. It shows the interest that we're actually developing in this whole entire entrepreneurship program. But I'm also beginning to realize that we are asking questions out of curiosity, which is good. But most of those questions will be answered when you're running the training program, the Heal Our program that Simmet talked about in his overview. So why it's true you are anxious, we say those anxieties will be solved when we are running the training program. Okay? Thank you very much for that. We want to run straight into our next presentation. And that presentation is about business economics. I'll leave no time now. I give you the presenter, Mike Dempsey.
Thank you. I'll introduce myself in a minute, but I'd like to know who you are. How many of you are students? You can raise your hand. Okay. How many are students? Great. And how many of you are medical students? Excellent, excellent. How many of you are entrepreneurs? You have a business now. Wow, 1, 2, lots. That's awesome. And how many of you have an idea for a business, but you haven't started it? Oh, that's great. And there's some overlap there. Some people currently have businesses and have ideas for businesses. And how many of you think that you want to be an entrepreneur, but you don't have an idea for your business yet? Wow. Okay, that's awesome. That's great. So this talk is going to be a little bit more practical. It's going to be about business economics, and I realize that I'm standing between you and lunch, and you've been sitting on this hard bench. I see people scooching around a little bit on the hard bench, and I'm not very funny. So the only way I'm going to keep your interest for an hour is to ask you questions. So this is going to be a little bit interactive, and particularly those of you that currently have businesses that are currently entrepreneurs, I'd like you to react to what I'm saying, tell me I'm wrong, and share your advice with other people, okay? So I'm Mike. I work at Simmet, just like Eric and Paul and Jenna do. I lead the team that Simmet talked about of the Accelerator Executives. And essentially, all the Simmet Accelerator Executives are basically the same. We are all people who have started 2 or 3 businesses. Some have been successful, many have failed, and we're now at a point where we're focusing most of our effort on helping other entrepreneurs be successful. The way we think about it is we have a lot of scars, and we want to prevent you from getting those scars. So let's see if I can make this work. All right, we're going to talk about business economics. Words that are highlighted in red in this presentation are the words I want to teach you. We'll have a little overview. We'll talk about market sizing. Eric talked about that briefly. I'll go into some more details. We'll talk about revenue, expenses, cash, a little bit of some examples, and then I'm going to pitch you. I'm going to pitch you at the end for this healer program. I'm going to try to sell you on the healer program. Okay. So given that some of you are existing business people in the room, you may know all of this already. And there's probably some accountants and some MBAs and some really smart economics people in the room who are going to look at this and laugh at me because you'll consider this like first grade economics. But this presentation isn't for you. And if you have a business and you have investors and you're selling millions of dollars worth of stuff a year, this presentation isn't for you either. This is for the basics of what you need if you're a young startup or just starting to think about creating your business, to put in your business plan so potential employees, your family members, other potential investors will believe you. Most importantly, it will be guidelines for how you're going to manage your business. When we were driving here from the hotel, there were people on the street selling bananas and water and all kinds of things. Each of those people does this every day. They do what I'm telling you about every day. They have to buy their bananas. They have some expenses. They have to sell so many bananas. And then they know after I sell, 100 bananas, I've covered my costs and everything else I sell is going to be profit. These principles apply whether you're a small business person selling bananas or whether you're Lucky Pharmacy with 25 buildings all over the country. Okay. Eric talked about the mistakes. He talked about the people who were doing blood typing, and they said it's this massive market. It's $1 billion of market. That's what we call a top-down. Oops, sorry. That's what we call a top-down analysis. So you look at literature, you do research, you say, this is a massive market, and we're going to make something that goes into this market. There's a second way that you can determine the market size, which is called bottom up. And the bottom up is you take how many things you think you can sell, bananas or syringes or new electronic medical records, and you multiply it by the number of things that the quantity of them. You multiply those two numbers together, and you say, that's my bottoms up analysis. So in the perfect world, you would do both. But to answer the gentleman's question earlier, many times if you're doing something that's really innovative, it's hard to get good data when you're going top down because you're creating something that no one has ever created before. But sometimes you can approximate. But doing something bottom up, that's much easier. You have to be a little bit worried because if you go to your investor and say, I'm going to sell 100 units, you're there at Christmas, Uncle Charles, and say, I'm going to sell 100 units. And then you go back at Easter and he says, how many units have you sold? Well, I haven't sold any. So that's a number that your investors, your employees, they can remember and think about and hold you accountable for. So what do you think of this phrase? We'll have a $10 million business if we only get 1% of a $10 billion market. Someone volunteer, or I'll call on you. Would you believe that? If someone came to you and said, I want I want you to give me $1 million because I'm going to have a $10 million business. And you say, how do you know you're going to have it? How do you know you're going to have a $10 million business? And they say, well, the top-down analysis says it's a $10 billion market, so I don't have to be too successful to get that. I only need to sell 1% or penetrate 1% of that market. What do you think of that? Would you invest in that company? You, the earnest-looking gentleman in the suit. That's you. Would you invest in that company? Okay. Tell me why you would. Okay. Some people think that. Some people think if I only need to be even just a little successful, it's a good investment. And while that is true, what that tells me is they don't understand how many units they can really sell. They're kind of selling themselves short. They maybe don't even understand who their customer is, right? I would rather them say, I have 50 customers identified, all of whom want to buy my syringe or my medical test or my bananas, and I need your money so I can buy the bananas or the syringes or the test equipment to give them, right? It's really, really important that you understand your customers, and Paul is going to talk about that a lot. If you understand your customers, doing this bottom-up market analysis is actually quite easy. Revenue. Here's another word in red. Revenue is the amount of money that people give you. It's really simple. Sometimes people call it income, sometimes people call it bookings, but basically revenue is the money that people give you. This can be in a variety of forms. You see a lot of cell phones out there. I see a lot of cell phones where you're probably using scratch cards to put dollars on it. So those companies that are selling you the scratch cards, they know that you're going to put $5 on this week and maybe $5 on next week. So they have monthly recurring revenue. You paid money for the cell phone up front, right? So that's a one-time fee. The details of how you get the revenue aren't really important for this conversation, but I just want you to know that there's this idea called revenue. Now we're going to get a little more complicated. There are fixed expenses. Fixed expenses are expenses that don't change as a function of volume. So there are some examples up there. Rent is a great example. You have to have an office. You have to have an office if you sell 0 units or if you sell 1 million units, right? Here's the reality for many of you. Your salary as the founder or the CEO, you got to pay yourself, right? You got to make a living. If the company doesn't sell anything, you still want to pay yourself. I mean, some people are willing to forgo that, but in general, salaries, rent, all of that kind of stuff that doesn't change when based on how many things you're selling, those are all called fixed expenses. Fixed because they don't change. Does that make sense? Okay. This is an important idea here. Customer acquisition costs. Many people don't understand this. Who wants to tell me what they think the customer acquisition cost is? Yes, sir.
Yes, so the customer acquisition cost is how much you will spend to sell.
Advertisement. Yes. You print brochures. You have a sign. You have a billboard. You have to pay for the billboard. You have to pay for the brochures. If maybe you have a misspelling on your billboard and people look at it and say, I'm not going to buy anything from these clowns. You've still spent the money. It's still a fixed cost. Yes, sir. So the answer is transportation costs. Tell me more about that.
Well, suppose you are making a business in Raleigh and you have to move from here to go and have the goods sold in that place, the cost it will
Okay.
take years
Yeah.
to move from place to place to have the goods sold.
Great. So that's an example of like a startup cost, right? If you have to buy machinery or if you have to move someplace. So all of those are fixed expenses. And I think you can understand that there's a good reason to keep your fixed expenses as low as possible, because once you've committed to the rent, it's hard to get out of it, right? Variable expenses. Someone tell me what they think variable expenses are. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Variable expenses, the word variable expenses itself, it does change over time.
Exactly. So variable expenses change with the number of things that you sell. So for example, one of the biggest of these is the cost of whatever you're selling. If I'm going to sell this water bottle, may I? If I'm going to sell this to you, I have to buy it, right? So it costs me, I don't know, I'll make this up, $1 to buy it, and I'm going to sell it to you for $2. Okay, so $4.50 for 12. So that's how much it costs you. That's the cost of goods sold, say 50 cents to buy one of these. But if I don't sell any, I won't buy any, right? But if I sell, all of a sudden I get an order for 100, I have to buy 100. So that's a variable cost. That cost changes depending on how many things you sell. Shipping, this is why I was a little confused when we were talking about transportation. Shipping costs are also variable costs, because if you don't sell anything, you don't have to ship anything, right? So how many of you do better with graphs than with words? I personally like graphs better than words, but some people don't. So the graphs that we're going to look at here, we're going to look at two examples and we're going to build them up one by one. So what you see in front of you is dollars on the vertical axis and number of units sold on the horizontal axis. Doesn't matter what you're selling. This principle applies to bananas, syringes, and the most complicated medical device in the world, okay? Fixed expenses, that's that line that goes across there. So look, it's always the same amount, right? It's fixed. It doesn't change no matter how many units you sell. Variable expenses does. So if you sell nothing, you have no expense because you're not buying any of the water bottles. If you sell a lot of water bottles, you have a lot of variable expenses. So what do you think your total expenses are? Someone take a guess at what the total expenses are. Sorry? Yes, total expenses are the variable expenses plus your fixed expenses. So that's that red line. One of the truths of business economics is anything that's in red is bad. So you have total expenses there, which just look at this. If you don't sell anything, you've still got to pay your rent. You've still got to pay for these brochures with the typo on it, right? Now we can also plot revenue. What's revenue? Yes, revenue is what people pay you. So there's revenue. Again, another truism. Green is good. Red is bad, green is good. And the same thing, if you don't sell anything, no one's going to pay you any money, so you have zero revenue, right? The more units you sell, the more revenue you have. So I know the graph is getting complicated, but is everyone tracking? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so now we're going to have some fun. There's your profit. As soon as your revenues pass your total expenses, you start making money, right? At a volume below that, you're not making any money. you're not at what they call break even. You got to go sell more water or bananas or syringes. But once you pass that point, which is called the break even point, everything else is profit, right? Does this make sense for the visual learners in the room? Okay. Now, we're going to do the same thing, same graph. You got dollars, you got units, right? You got fixed expenses, expenses never change. You got variable expenses change with the number of units you sell. That ends up being total expenses. That's exactly the same thing as we saw before, okay? Now, I'm going to put a different revenue line on there. What do you think's happening there? Yeah. The company is never going to hit break even. The company is never going to make money because, well, it might someplace out like over on the other side of the courtyard, right? When you keep running these lines out. But you can see here that it hasn't hit the break even point, right? We don't have the smiley face. We don't have the equilibrium point. So these two examples of these two simple business economics models show you that if you understand simply your expenses, fixed and variable expenses, your revenue as a function of volume, you can decide how you want to move these graphs around. I'm going to go back to the happier slide. So what if you paid for more billboards, right? So your fixed cost, billboards we said were a fixed cost, that would go up. So the red line would go up. That would mean your break-even point moved out someplace, right? The point that the green revenue line passes the total expense line moves out. But maybe you're selling more units. So, you know, more people see about your product on the billboard. You're seeing more units. And that means that the area, the green triangle there is bigger. So maybe you make more money. But if you spend on the billboard and you don't sell any more units, you can use this graph, you can use these data to say, that's not a good investment. I'm going to try something else. I'm going to advertise on radio, or I'm going to make more brochures or something like that. Does that make sense? Do you have a question, sir? Okay.
Yeah, I think some vendors or some entrepreneurs can bear with me. In Liberia, there's this little difference we experience about one of the fixed expense. And that fixed expense has to do with the rent. So when the owner of the building sees that the business is improving, he tells you, I want to increase my rent. And then you have a problem with that fixed expense because you have set your budget.
Right.
Maybe like for a whole year. As soon as you look in the middle of the year,
yeah.
And the owner of the building tell you, say, I'm going to have a 10% increase of my rent, but effective by this month. So then it affects your business in Liberia.
Yeah. So that's the question was, sometimes when your landlord sees that you're successful, they say, hey, I want a little bit more, right? I want some more rent. So we're living in a time with a lot of inflation. Even if your landlord doesn't base his decisions on your success, your fixed expenses will change over time. Rent will increase. Gas costs will increase. So again, this just comes back to, if in your head you have a model like this, like what's behind me, you can say, all right, my rent has jumped up this much. Therefore, what am I going to do? Can I sell more units? Maybe you can't sell more units. So you go back to your landlord and say, look, I can't do it. If you increase my rent, I'm never going to hit break even. I'm going to be at the second graph that we saw up there, and I'm going to go out of business, and you're going to get nothing. So don't raise my rent. In fact, you should lower my rent. You should lower my rent so that way I can get a little bit more money. I can increase this green thing, and I can give you more money next year, right? All right, back to the words. That green triangle, which is, oops, sorry. That green triangle, which is the point after you break even, after the smiley face, right? The area in that green triangle is what? It's profit. That's what we're all looking for, right? That's when you've passed the point that you're losing money and now you're making profit. So that's another red word, another important word. In some businesses, it's easy to confuse profit with cash flow. And this is a bit of a subtle point. And a cash-based business where you're not, when you haven't borrowed any money or you don't have any investors, the only way that you can expand the business is usually from profits that business generates, right? So selling water bottles, you start by buying the water bottles, you make a little bit of money on a little profit on each of the water bottles, and then maybe you buy more the next day and more the day after that. But many businesses, particularly businesses that need a big investment up front, like let's say you have a new high-tech solution and you need to have R&D or you need to build a manufacturing plant or something. You realistically can't do that from profits because you don't have anything to sell, right? You have to make an investment in order to sell it. So what you will typically do in those cases is you will trade part of your company for an investment. That's called equity, right? You're going to an investor and you're saying, I've got this great business idea. I'll give you 10% of my business, but I need $100,000. They're going to look at these graphs, by the way, to make sure that they're right. You get that $100,000, you bring it in, and then you can start generating cash, and then you can use that cash to support your business. But it's important to realize that you may be burning cash, spending more money than you're making. If you spend more money than the profit that you make, you're operating at a loss, you're burning cash, you still need to pay your rent, still need to pay your employees, you still need a salary. That money has to come from somewhere. And that's typically where an investor is involved. Okay. So Simi and Eric both spoke about the Healer program. I'm going to go into some more details on that so y'all know what you're getting into. We got so many entrepreneurs in the group, this is going to be useful. Okay. On the left, your leftmost side of Simi's program, he talked about Healer outreach and seminars. That's what this is. You're at the inaugural outreach and seminar. There will be more. Basically, the idea of these is a lecture on business economics or a lecture on marketing and, just to educate people. We don't know if you're going to be involved with the program, but it's just so people know about Healer. We talked about the idea portion of the program, or ideation. Let me tell you a little bit more about what that is. We want to educate potential entrepreneurs. So those of you that are just starting out, those of you that have maybe an aspiration to be an entrepreneur, we would expect you to show up 3 times a week for 3 months. And it's like this. It's a lecture format. And some of the materials, some of the lectures will be very similar to what I just said. So general ideas about business economics, not focused on your bottle company or your syringe company or my banana company, right? And at the end of this, you're going to get no money. You're going to get nothing but education. Now this gets a little complicated. Oh, sorry. Let me back up for a minute. Just this EOI up there means expression of the interest. You saw Simi put up the bit.ly link for an EOI. If you're interested in participating in the program, you fill that out, and that's how we figure out where to slot you. Okay. So there's also the creation program. This is for people who have a good idea for a business. Maybe they have a business, but they're looking to get it off the ground a little bit more, right? They're looking to have a formal business plan Maybe they need to go out and get some mentors. Maybe they're looking to get investors. We expect that you're going to have to work 10 to 15 hours a week for about 6 months. And you're going to get assigned a lot of mentors. And the mentors are going to be on you like a dog on a piece of meat. They're going to just be, you've got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And it's going to be focused on your business. So not a generic profit and loss graph like I showed you, but how many of your units are you going to sell? How do you know you're going to sell this many units in March? How do you know that people are going to pay $2 or it's cost 50 cents to buy the water? And it's going to be specifically about you and your business. And at the end of that, everyone who comes out of it will have a viable business plan with all of the 12 points that Eric mentioned. Some of you may also get some funding. We're prepared to offer grants of up to 10,000 US dollars. The third part of the program is the implementation program. So this is for companies that are maybe more mature. They have a business plan, they're going concerns, they're generating revenue, they have their business under control, but they're thinking about things like maybe I should open another office, or maybe I should expand my offering. So they don't need the business plan, they don't need the education on business economics, they need a thought partner, they need someone to talk to. So in this case, it's just ongoing business support from people like Eric or Jenna or Paul or I or others, right? We're just someone to talk to, someone to bounce ideas off, entrepreneur to entrepreneur. And the way we're trying to set this up is it's a progression. You see the complicated arrows up there. I mean, I am an engineer, so I have to have arrows pointing all over the place, right? The idea is for less mature entrepreneurs, you start at your left, the ideation program, then you move into the creator program, then you move into the implementation program. But you can enter at any point. If you're a mature company, you can enter all the way to the right. So we're very excited about this. And what we're hoping to do, what we're hoping to do is hold office hours after this session. So you all are going to go to lunch. You're going to come back, hear Paul talk. There'll be some closing remarks. And then we're all going to be around for 2 or 3 hours. So any questions, particularly in the overflow room that you didn't get answered, any questions that don't get answered here, there'll be plenty of time in office hours to talk about them. You can pitch us your business idea. We can talk about, how we could help or not. So hopefully that's a useful opportunity. And there's a spreadsheet that we have created, a Google sheet, which generates all of those graphs, and you can put in your revenue and your expenses and so on. I realize that link up there is ridiculously long. So I think maybe there's going to be a after seminar email sent out or text sent out. We'll include, yes?
Yeah, I'm going to make a special announcement about that.
Okay. So as part of that special announcement, I hope we can include this link. We'll shorten the link. We'll use Bitly or whatever and send this out to folks too.
Okay.
So feel free to download that and play with it and use it. Okay. Questions?
Thank you so much.
Do you always ask the first question? Like in class and everything? It's all good. It's all good.
I just have like 2 questions. The first is, what are those parameters you try to put in place to determine the price of your goods to put it on the market? What are those things you check first before pricing your goods? And then the next one is, what do you do if your cost of production is fixed, but the demand of your product is low?
you're screwed. If you're spending more money and the demand isn't there, you don't have a business, right? Maybe you have a nonprofit, right? But the second one is easy. That doesn't work. You're bankrupt. That's not a viable business, right? If the question was, if the expenses are higher than the demand, what do? You don't do anything, right? Now, the first question is a really good one and a really important one. And just to repeat it, the question was, how do you figure out how to price your product? And so in another life, I teach at the MIT Sloan School a class on entrepreneurship. And MIT has 2 or 3 full semester classes just on pricing. So there's this interesting approach where you can ask people 5 questions. When is my thing going to be too expensive? When is it going to be too cheap? When is it going to be about just right? And I forgot the other 2 questions, but you get the idea. It's sort of, Goldilocks and the 3 bears. And you plot all of these data and you can figure out a range of pricing. So that's the kind of thing that we would talk through in the middle stage of the healer program, right? In the creation stage. We could do, it's called a Van Westenhorp analysis. We could do that with you for your particular thing. That involves research, involves going out and talking to customers and really understanding what they need. Paul will talk more about that. It's not complicated, but it does require effort and it does require an approach. And people have done this, so you can do it too.
Thank you. All right. I want to help you with his question. He said, how will you know your price, right? Based on how you buy the goods. And so, yeah, based on how much you buy the product, and the amount of customers you have. In entrepreneurship, we have what we call the 5 marketing P's: your price, the place, the product, the promotion, right? Because if you have the product at the wrong place, it won't go. And if you have the wrong product but at the right place, it will still not go. So in such, what you're about to sell, you need to know exactly what you're coming to sell and who are you selling to. Entrepreneurs, we people that solve problems, right? We are not doctors, we are not nurses, but we also solve problems, yeah? Because we identify what is the gap in the market and then we bring that solution. So you can only know how to sell it based on how you buy it and the amount of people you will sell it to. Yeah. Thank you.
That's awesome. You should sit down here. You should just teach this, right?
All right. My name is Richmond. Just a follow-up question to the question he asked and the answer she provided. Whole other factor constant. I did my market survey and I did my projections. Is it possible from the graphic analysis you gave that the fixed cost in the short or long run might become a variable cost or the reverse?
Great question and a very subtle point. Can fixed costs and variable costs switch? Absolutely. And you can play all kinds of financial games around that. For example, one way to change fixed cost to variable cost is to take equipment that you would have to buy and lease it, right? A common technique in the United States, believe it or not, is for someone to buy a factory, a piece of property, and then lease it back to themselves, right? So you can play games to change variable costs to fixed costs, but for most startups, those are quite sophisticated financial maneuvers and can sometimes lead to some tax implications that people may or may not like. So the suggestion is if we're going to think about doing something like that, let's get a real accountant, a real CPA who can think about the implications for the business, the implications for the taxes. But you can certainly do it.
Yeah, Mike, I have a quick question. Those viewing from home, should an entrepreneur expect break even in a business plan startup? Should an entrepreneur expect break even at a business plan startup?
So should the entrepreneur expect break even
Yeah.
as part of a business plan startup?
Exactly. I think the question is at what phase to this begin to consider break even?
I see. Okay. So, well, first and foremost, you need to break even, right? If you don't break even, you're like the gentleman over there. You don't have a business. You need to break even. So where that happens is very, very dependent on the way you as the entrepreneur architect the business. Some of you may say, I want to be just driven from my own money, my own pocket, my own dollars, in which case it's going to take you longer to hit break even because you just can't get that revenue curve up high enough or fast enough. Other people may decide that you're going to take an outside investor and that's going to put jet fuel in your business and you're going to grow really quickly. If that's the case, you would expect the break-even point to be in earlier, and your investor's going to expect that too. They're going to expect to get their payback.
Hello, my name is Christopher. I own a business. I'm an entrepreneur. I want to know whether Simmet will be able to help me if I want to expand in the health sector as an entrepreneur. And with my current idea, currently I own a business where we provide solar solution to businesses and clinics and hospitals. Now I have a new idea, like having a platform where to connect doctors, nurses in different areas. Will Simmet be able to help me to expand in a new idea and with my current idea that I have?
I think so, but I would like to talk to you during office hours. One of the limitations is Simmet and this program in general is focused on healthcare. But we interpret healthcare very broadly. So if you're providing solar power for healthcare clinics and other organizations to help them, maintain the cold chain or maintain their equipment, sure, right? If you're supplying solar power for a bar, it's probably a little outside of the scope. But yeah, we'll talk afterwards.
One from the viewing room again. Say, can a service provider be an entrepreneur? If yes, I want your plan. Sorry. Can you talk about it a little bit? I keep having you talking about business and service.
Yeah, absolutely. Services are products, right? I mean, a service provider is, frankly, one of the easiest entrepreneurial businesses because usually it's you that's supplying the service, right? You're a tailor. So you know how long it takes you to make a dress or a suit. And you don't have to pay other people money, right? So service businesses are beautiful because they typically don't require a lot of startup costs, right? You can start them fairly inexpensively. And if it's usually in something a field that you know about, you have an advantage because you're not trying to create something that is brand new.
Well, thank you, Mark. My name is Renzi. I have two questions. One is, as an entrepreneur, I know entrepreneurship go with a lot of risk taking, and then how do we minimize risks in our businesses? One. Number two, if you convincing an investor to invest in your idea, how do you show out number like in 6 to 1 year time your growth? How do you calculate your growth and convince your investor? Thank you.
So that was 3 questions I'll point out. So the first question, or the first 2 questions are, does being an entrepreneur involve a lot of risk and how do you manage that risk? And, I'll make sort of editorial comment here. I hear all the time when people hear I'm an entrepreneur, oh, you take so much risk. How can you take that risk? What does your family think? I have a colleague I'm supporting who's Spanish, and when he told his father he was going to be an entrepreneur, his father wept and said, why can't you just go work at a bank? It's so risky. I actually think just the opposite. I think good entrepreneurs are masters at managing risk. Because if your business fails, you're not going to be able to pay your cell phone bill. You're not going to be able to put food on the table. So you're really incented. You're really, really incented to manage risk. And the way you beat down risk is you think about what keeps you awake at night. You think about every aspect of why your business is going to fail. And one of the things that we know, we can show you data on this, the reason most people fail in business is because they make something or they provide a service that nobody wants. You're like, how can that be? Eric gave 4 or 5 examples of creating products that no one are willing to pay for. So the way you manage risk, first and foremost, is you understand your customer, you understand what they want, what value you can give them, and then you give them that value. Your second question was about investors. And I think you were asking, if you take on investors, what will they expect in return? Yes. Different investors will expect different things. Venture capital is the most expensive money you will ever borrow. You might as well go to a gangster and borrow money before you get money from venture capital. But many businesses don't have a choice. They have to get venture capital money, ventures that need tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to start. And what a VC wants, what a venture capital wants, is very different from what your uncle wants, right? Your uncle may say, I don't care if you're going to lose the money. It wouldn't be good, but if you do it, it's not bad. So it really is going to be dependent on the investor, whether it's an angel, whether it's a VC, whether it's friends and family. They all kind of have different needs. And we'll talk in detail, or Eric in particular, as an investor, can talk in detail about these different classes of investors and typically what they're looking for return and how long they want until you can pay them back.
Yeah. Hold on to what you said earlier, that once you invest in something and you're not getting profit, that business tend to be an NGO. Okay. But here is a situation wherein I'm persistent on my craft. I know that this will yield result. So I continue to put in the necessary resources and effort. And over the time I feel, but yet I know that I'm very persistent and consistent that this will yield result. And by the time I have a break even like 2 years or 3 years, how can you turn that?
So are you asking how you can obtain a break-even point in 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, basically that's what I'm saying.
Well, you start by doing those graphs, right? And you have a baseline case, so a case that's sort of what you think will work. Maybe you have a conservative case. Maybe you have you can, with the spreadsheet that you can get from the Bitly link, you can play with different numbers. Let's say I invest more in advertising so I get higher volume. How does that move your break-even point? Let's say I reduce my fixed expenses. I don't rent anything, right? How does that change your break-even point? So if you have an objective of a 2-year break-even point, you can make the math work to make that happen. And then you just have to make sure that you're not kidding yourself. You have to make sure that the reality of what you can sell or what you can produce matches the math. And we can talk more if I didn't answer your question correctly. Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm getting done. So any questions that we didn't answer, we can talk about in office hours.
And let's applaud the both speakers together.
thank you also for participating by listening, throwing out questions. It means a lot to us. Let me run with a few quick announcements because we're about to go out for lunch. You keep seeing 2 links being popped up on the screen. Can somebody put it up, please? Simmet talked about that when he was doing the overview of the program, and they're going to be up there. What we're trying to see is to make sure you can have them accessible through your emails as well. What makes them very important is one of the links is going to serve as sign up for your admission into the Heal Our program. So if you didn't sign up, I'm not saying you will not participate, but you might not participate. So you don't want to take chances. So take advantage of it. Use the sign up link and sign up for the Heal Our program we're talking about. The second link is going to serve as, say, an event evaluation. What we're going through right now, we want to get feedback. You know what you didn't know previously that you now know because as a result of these presentations, we want to have this quick evaluation from this event. And also about our launch. Please, do we all here? Good, it's on the screen. Do we all here have name tags? It's very important. You're here in the hall and you have name tags. It's important. What makes this very important is the caterers might not serve you in the absence of a name tag. It's a serious complaint that the meal or the food intended for the participant are being cut through by other people and not participating in the workshop. So we don't want to have that on our hands. So the way they will identify you as a participant here is to have your name tag. That's the one thing they can use. We have few remaining in the back. If you didn't have one here, please try to get one to avoid the embarrassment. Please. And this goes to our viewing room as well. If you're there, please try to get our name tag from there to avoid it. Last but not least on the list of announcements, the meal is right out there. We just want to give the courtesy to our platform guests to queue up and go and get the meal, and then they can come back down. Then we all can file in, see how we can get our food. So I'm going to suggest to avoid, the conjecture or the movement in the hallway, we might use the right door for exit. You go out, just get your food, and then you come through the left entry. I think that will work fine instead of bumping into one another. So that being said, I want us all to give ourselves a hand of applause for the participation. So respectively, we just ask our platform guests to just use this right entry and just get into the hallway, get their meal, and then you could come back here because the anatomy lab that I used yesterday is being occupied by other viewing people. So